Okay, so if you're hunting for that sound, that liquid funk sound, that really chewy, touch-sensitive wah thing that just makes a bass line pop,
Oh, yeah.
chances are you know exactly what gear we're talking about today. See, for the first few decades of guitar effects, pedals were, well, pretty simple things.
Right, mostly fuzz, maybe some basic tremolo, often kind of crude, really.
Exactly. But then, 1972 rolls around, and this company, Musitronics, or Tron, as everyone knows them, they just changed the game.
You really did. It's like they pulled effects pedals out of that simple circuit world and pushed them into this professional, sophisticated, almost synth-like territory. And crucially, they put it all in a stomp box you could actually take on stage, a really tough stomp box, usually.
Right, built like tanks.
And that's kind of our mission for you today, isn't it? To dive into Tron and figure out why they got that nickname. The Rolls-Royce of pedals.
Yes. Let's do it.
Well, the founding story kind of sets the scene. It starts in 72, New Jersey, and it's these two guys, Mike Bagel, who is the engineer, the real tech head. Okay.
And Aaron Newman, who is both a musician and an engineer. That combination was key.
So you had the player's ear and the engineer's brain working together right from the start.
Precisely. Their whole ambition was defined by that partnership.
Yeah.
You've got the musician saying, okay, this is the sound I need, and the engineer thinking, right, how do we build studio-level electronics to make that happen?
So the goal wasn't just another fuzz box. They were aiming higher.
Way higher.
Yeah.
They wanted to take those really complex, powerful effects, the kind you'd usually only find in massive analog synthesizers back then.
Right, things that filled a room.
Yeah. And translate that into a rugged pedal a working musician could stomp on night after night.
And that's the crucial difference, isn't it? Because there were other pedal companies.
Oh, absolutely. You had Maestro, Sola Sound, Shinai, pioneers for sure. They laid important groundwork.
But their focus was different.
Generally, yeah. They were often modifying existing simple circuits, fuzz, basic overdrives, that sort of thing, musitronics. They weren't just tweaking. They approached it like synth designers. Okay, explain that a bit more. Synth-level design in a pedal.
It means they were applying complex, high-fidelity circuit concepts, things usually reserved for synthesizers, directly into the pedal format. They were essentially building mini synth modules for your feet, much more complex engineering.
Okay, let's unpack the result of that, because it seems like that synth-level thinking paid off almost immediately with their very first product.
Oh, instantly. We have to talk about the Tron Third. Launched in 1972. It wasn't just another pedal, it was, well, a revelation. It basically defined the modern sound of funk and fusion, guitar and bass.
Right, the Tron Third. It's technically called an envelope filter, which sounds a bit dry.
Yeah, it doesn't quite capture it.
Not at all. For anyone listening who isn't familiar, think of it like an automatic wah pedal. But here's the magic. Instead of your foot controlling the wah sweep.
It's your playing, your touch does it.
Exactly.
And what's fascinating is how they achieved that touch sensitivity. This is where that synth DNA really shows. The Tron Third used optical sensors inside little things called Vactrols.
Okay, Vactrols. That sounds advanced for 72 pedals.
It was advanced stuff for a pedal back then. And it meant the tone was controlled dynamically by how hard or soft you played. Play softly. You get a slow, subtle filter sweep. Really dig in and hit the string hard. That filter snaps wide open, fast and bright. It lets you get those amazing quacky or chewy, almost liquid sounds just by changing how you play.
Yeah.
It became a real expressive tool, not just an effect.
That is the ultimate aha moment in pedal history, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the impact was huge, almost immediate, because it landed in the hands of some seriously influential players.
Totally. Think Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead. That sound became part of his signature tone for years.
Right.
Larry Coryell, the jazz fusion guitarist, used one, and of course the funk masters, Bootsy Collins. His bass sound is almost unimaginable without the Tron Third.
He practically weaponized it.
He did. And maybe the most iconic example, the one everyone knows even if they don't know the pedal's name, is Stevie Wonder.
Ah, yes, Higher Ground.
That's the one. The clavinet on Higher Ground. That wet, pulsing, super funky sound is the Tron Third. It showed this box wasn't just an add-on, it could be part of the instrument's core voice.
It really cemented its legacy. People still say it's the definitive envelope filter. And, talking to musicians from that time, many argue it's one of the most musically expressive pedals ever made, full stop.
I wouldn't disagree, but like you said, being the Rolls-Royce takes more than one hit, even a massive one like the Third. They needed to build on that.
So this is where it gets really interesting, right? They didn't just rest on the third.
Not at all. After the Mutron the Third took off, Musitronics basically spent the rest of the 70s building out a whole suite of these high-end, high-fidelity pedals. They were designing stuff that just sounded incredible and kept pushing the envelope, pardon the pun, for what analog pedals could do.
We should probably touch on a few specifics to get a sense of that engineering depth.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Mutron biphase earlier, from '74. That wasn't just a simple swirly sound, was it?
Oh, heavens no. A typical phaser back then gave you a nice kind of two-dimensional swirl. The biphase, it was this beastly dual phaser, meaning two completely separate phase-shifting circuits inside one massive box. And the genius part was you could make them interact, sweep against each other, run them in stereo.
Wow, okay.
Sonically, it meant you got this incredibly warm, thick, almost three-dimensional phasing texture, so much deeper and more complex than anything else available. It's still hugely revered for that sound.
And then came the octave divider in '75.
Yeah.
Octave pedals were notoriously tricky back then, right?
Yeah.
Especially getting a clean sub-octave.
Extremely tricky. Generating a stable sub-octave that actually tracked the note you were playing was a huge headache.
Yeah.
Early octave pedals often sounded, well, awful. Glitchy, warbly. The octave would just drop out.
Yeah, I've heard some horrors.
Right. But the Mutron octave divider was one of the first ones to really nail it. Again, because of the high-quality design and components. People praised it specifically for tracking cleanly and giving this really solid, powerful sub-octave. It sounded like you suddenly had a phantom bass player doubling your line perfectly in tune.
So consistently complex, high-quality engineering across the board. Did they ever simplify things?
They did make some concessions later, yeah. Like, they released the Micro V in '77, which was basically a smaller, simpler envelope filter. But even then, the core philosophy was still about high-fidelity sound.
Looking at that whole lineup, the biphase, the octave divider, they had a flanger too, right?
Yep, a great flanger.
What was the common thread, besides sounding great?
I'd say it was the uncompromising build quality and, crucially, the headroom. These things were often physically huge.
Took up half your pedal board.
Exactly. They used studio-quality parts packed into these large, incredibly rugged, almost military-spec metal enclosures.
And the power requirements. That tells the story too, doesn't it?
It tells you everything. They typically ran on 18 volts, sometimes even needing their own special power supplies, not just a standard battery or 9V adapter.
Why the high voltage?
Headroom. Pure and simple. We talk about headroom in pro audio all the time. For the listener, what it means is the circuit can handle a much stronger input signal without distorting or crapping out.
Ah, so it just get overloaded easily?
Precisely. That higher voltage lets the pedal handle bigger signal peaks without clipping. It preserves the dynamics of your playing, keeps the signal clean, which is exactly what studio engineers and discerning players want.
And that headroom was the secret weapon against tone suck.
Absolutely. That was the constant complaint about cheaper 9-volt pedals back then. You plug them in and suddenly your guitar tone sounds thin or muffled. Musicians loved Mutrons because they didn't do that. Your core guitar or bass sound stayed pristine and the effect was layered cleanly on top.
And that focus on clarity, keeping the full frequency range intact.
Yeah.
That leads to the bass players, right? This was huge for them.
It was a genuine revolution for bassists. Before Mutron, pedals were mostly a frustrating experience for bass players.
Why is that?
Well, most fuzzes, filters, wahs, they were designed with guitar frequencies in mind. When you fed them the deep, low frequencies of a bass guitar, they'd often just choke. They'd cut off the low end, making the bass sound weak, or they'd turn into a muddy mess.
Right. So the Mutrons, built with that high headroom and full frequency response.
They handled the low end beautifully. They basically handed bass players a whole new sonic palette.
Which explains why guys like Bootsy Collins and Louis Johnson were all over them.
Totally. They gravitated to Mutron because they could finally get those funky, expressive filter sweeps or phase sounds without losing the fundamental power and depth of their bass. Mutron proved bassists could use complex effects seriously. It fundamentally changed the sound of funk, soul, disco, fusion bass lines forever.
But there's always a but, isn't there? All that quality, that complex engineering, those big metal boxes, it couldn't have been cheap.
Not even close. They were significantly more expensive than the competition. You had companies like Electro Harmonics or MXR putting out smaller, much more affordable pedals.
Yeah, the Phase 90s, the big muffs.
Yeah.
Much more accessible.
Right. Musitronics, meanwhile, commanded a premium price. And that high-end positioning combined with the quality. Well, that's exactly why they earned that nickname. They really were the Rolls-Royce of pedals in the 70s.
But being the Rolls-Royce in a market that's rapidly expanding and favoring affordability, that sounds like a recipe for trouble eventually. Did that high price tag limit who could actually buy them?
Inevitably, yes. I mean, the studio pros, the established touring musicians, they could often afford them. But for younger players, cutting-edge bands on a budget, Mutrons might have been out of reach, despite how good they sounded.
So being the best wasn't enough.
In that specific market moment, no. The trouble really started brewing in the late 1970s. Mutron was arguably still making the best-sounding pedals around, but the landscape was shifting under their feet.
Competition was heating up dramatically.
Hugely. You had Boss coming in with their compact, standardized, incredibly durable, and relatively cheap pedals. MXR was hitting that sweet spot of simplicity, good sound, and affordability. And EHX, Electro Harmonics, they were just flooding the market with all sorts of wild, experimental, but generally cheaper stuff.
And Mutron, with their big, expensive 18V boxes, they couldn't compete on price or size.
They just couldn't keep up with the sheer volume and the price points of the market leaders. The financial pressure mounted.
What happened then?
Eventually, the company got squeezed out. It was sold off to another company called RMS Amplified Music Products. But they never really regained that original Mutron magic or market momentum.
So the original Musitronics era just kind of ended.
Effectively, yeah, it closed. And there's a real irony there, isn't there? The very things that made them legendary, the super high-quality parts, the complex synth-like designs, were also what made them too expensive to survive when the market shifted towards mass affordability.
And because they were expensive and maybe didn't produce as many units as, say, EHX or MXR?
Exactly. That's why the originals became instant collector's items. They were relatively rare to begin with compared to the competition. Once production stopped, finding an original Mutron III or biphase in good working order became a serious quest. They got very valuable very quickly.
But the story doesn't end there, with bankruptcy and vintage collectors hoarding pedals.
No, thankfully not. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that enduring cult status, the fact that the originals were so good and so revolutionary, that kept the legacy alive. Vibrant enough, in fact, for a proper modern revival.
Right, because the founder, Mike Bagel, he came back, didn't he?
He did. He resurfaced in the pedal world in the 2000s. Initially, he started a new company called MuFX.
MuFX, okay.
And they started making updated versions of his classics, smaller, maybe more reliable components, but capturing that core Mutron sound. Things like the Microtron, which was his new take on the Mutron III circuit.
But then the actual Mutron brand came back, too.
Yes. And this was crucial. In the 2010s, the official Mutron brand name was properly resurrected, and importantly, it had Mike Bagel's blessing and involvement.
And they went right back to the source.
Straight back. They started reissuing faithful recreations of the icons, the Mutron III, the biphase, the octave divider, trying to capture that original magic as closely as possible.
Yet it seems like they succeeded, because those reissues aren't just nostalgia trips. They're seriously respected pedals today.
They absolutely are. And that's the testament to Bagel's original designs, right? Because they were engineered to such a high, almost synth-like standard back in 1972, they still hold up sonically against modern pedals.
So current Mutrons are still considered top tier.
Definitely. They remain pretty much the gold standard, especially if you're into funk or jam bands or anywhere you need that really expressive, touch-sensitive filtering and phasing that Mike Bagel pioneered nearly half a century ago now. It's amazing, really.
They really do represent a kind of peak of analog effects design from that era.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize all this. When we look back at the Musitronics story, what are the main takeaways? Why do they still matter so much in the world of gear?
Well, I think there are maybe 4 key points that really define their impact.
Go for it.
First, they basically pioneered the whole idea of a high-end stomp box. They proved you could put complex, studio-quality, synth-level effects into a pedal that musicians could actually use reliably.
Okay, point 1. Pioneering high-end pedals. What's next?
Second, they absolutely defined the sound of the envelope filter. The Mutron III wasn't just an envelope filter. Its expressiveness set the benchmark for that auto-wah sound in countless genres. It's the reference point.
Define the envelope filter. Got it. Third,
and this one sometimes gets overlooked, I think they sparked that revolution for bass players. They showed that bassists could use pedals seriously, integrating complex, full-frequency effects without gutting their fundamental tone. That was huge.
Yeah, the bass revolution. Crucial.
And finally, that relentless focus on quality, even though it hurt them financially in the short term, built this incredible, enduring cult legacy. It made the originals highly sought-after collector's items and ultimately fueled the successful reissues that are thriving today. Quality created legacy.
It's a fantastic story of quality over quantity, really. Or maybe quality creating long-term quantity through reputation.
It is. And, it raises an interesting final thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over.
Okay, leave us with something to chew on.
How strange is it that Mutron's unwavering focus on the very best components, the most complex and expensive designs, the exact things that led to their financial struggles and downfall in the hyper-competitive 70s market? How did those very same factors become the precise reason they're so revered today? The reason their legacy endured and the revival was so successful?
So the thing that killed them commercially back then is the exact thing that gives them their god-tier status now?
Exactly. Think about that tension. The struggle between high cost, high quality, and mass market appeal. And how sometimes, maybe, refusing to compromise on quality, even if it leads to failure in the moment, can be the ultimate guarantee of a lasting, respected legacy decades later.